I need you to listen to me very carefully because the story I am about to tell you is not a metaphor. It is not a parable, and it is not a hallucination brought on by a dying brain. What I saw is real. What I felt is real. And the warning I am bringing to you today is the only thing that matters in your life, even if you do not realize it yet. My name is Sarah, and for most of my life, I was the woman who had everything under control. If you looked at me from the outside, you would have seen a picture of absolute success. I lived in Seattle, a city of gray skies, endless rain, and incredible wealth. I was not just a participant in this high society world. I was the one who orchestrated it. I worked as a corporate event planner. That was my title, but it does not really describe what I did. I built worlds for rich people. I took empty ballrooms and turned them into fantasies. I managed budgets that were larger than what most families earn in a lifetime. I decided the color of the lights, the texture of the napkins, the timing of the music, and the exact moment the champagne would be poured. I was obsessed with perfection. If a fork was out of place by an inch, I noticed it. If a flower was starting to wilt, I replaced it. I controlled the environment. I controlled the atmosphere. I thought I controlled my destiny. But deep down, this need for control came from a place of fear. I was not always this powerful woman in a tailored suit. I came from nothing. When I was 20 years old, I worked as a hotel maid in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. I remember the smell of industrial bleach and stale cigarette smoke. I remember the feeling of scrubbing other people's filth off the bathroom tiles until my hands were raw and red. I remember the way people looked through me as if I was invisible, as if I did not exist just because I was wearing a uniform and pushing a cart full of dirty sheets. I hated that life. I hated the poverty. I hated the feeling of being small. So I made a vow to myself. I swore that I would never be poor again. I swore that I would never be the one cleaning up the mess, but the one giving the orders. I worked my way up, clawing and fighting for every inch of ground. I went from scrubbing floors to managing the housekeeping staff, then to coordinating small meetings, and finally to planning the biggest galas in Washington state. I built a fortress around my heart with money and success. I told myself that I was safe. I told myself that I was good. I was a good person. I gave to charity, mostly because it looked good for my business reputation. I was polite to people as long as they were useful to me. But I had absolutely no room in my life for God. To be honest, I used to laugh at people who talked about Jesus. I thought they were weak. I thought religion was a crutch for people who were not strong enough to handle reality. I remember scrolling through the internet late at night, sometimes seeing titles about Christian testimonies or testimonies of hell. I would roll my eyes and scroll past them. I thought they were fairy tales invented to scare children or manipulate people into giving money to a church. I did not believe in sin. I believed in mistakes, sure, but not sin. I did not believe in judgment. I believed in cause and effect. And I certainly did not believe in hell. The idea that a modern, educated woman like me could end up in a place of eternal torment seemed ridiculous. I thought hell was something we created on earth through bad choices, like poverty or addiction. I did not understand that it was a literal place, a physical reality waiting for those who reject the truth. I had heard about evangelical testimonies where people claimed to have near-death experiences. I dismissed them all. I told myself it was just brain chemistry, just neurons firing for the last time before the lights went out forever. I was so arrogant. I was so sure of my own intelligence. I thought I knew better than the Bible. I thought I knew better than thousands of years of history. I thought I was the god of my own little universe. It was a Tuesday in November, and the rain was falling hard against the glass walls of the venue. It was a typical Seattle downpour, relentless and cold. I was standing on the balcony of the Sky View Center, looking out at the city lights reflecting on the wet pavement below. We were hosting a charity gala for a major tech company. The theme was Future Horizons. It was ironic, looking back on it now. We were celebrating a future I was not going to see. The room behind me was buzzing with the sound of expensive conversations. There were 500 guests, all dressed in black tie and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume, roasted duck, and fresh lilies. I stood in the shadows near the heavy velvet curtains, watching my creation. Everything was perfect. The lighting was a soft, golden hue that made everyone look younger and richer. The jazz band was playing at exactly the right volume, loud enough to set a mood, but soft enough to allow for business deals to be whispered over wine. I adjusted the earpiece in my ear. I was coordinating a team of 30 staff members. "Table 4 needs more water," I whispered into the microphone. "And someone fixed the centerpiece on table 12. It is leaning to the left." I watched as a young waiter rushed to obey my command. I felt a surge of satisfaction. This was my power. I spoke, and things happened. I looked at my watch. It was almost midnight. The event was winding down. The CEO was about to give his closing speech. I took a deep breath, inhaling the cold air coming off the glass. I felt tired, but it was a good kind of tired. It was the exhaustion of a winner. But as I stood there, watching the city below, a strange feeling washed over me. It was not pride. It was not joy. It was a sudden, hollow ache in the center of my chest. It felt like a vacuum. For a second, the noise of the party faded away, and I felt completely alone. I looked at the reflection of my face in the dark glass. I saw a woman who was beautiful, successful, and well-dressed. But I saw nothing behind the eyes. I shook my head, trying to push the feeling away. I told myself I was just stressed. I told myself I needed a vacation. I needed a drink. I needed to sleep. I did not let myself think that maybe, just maybe, I needed salvation. I did not let myself admit that despite all my money, I had no peace. I had a beautiful apartment that I barely slept in. I had a car I barely drove. I had friends who only liked me because I could get them into the best parties. My life was a stage set. It looked real from the audience, but if you walked behind the curtain, it was just plywood and empty space. I remember thinking about my old life again, the life of the hotel maid. I remembered a woman I used to work with back then. Her name was Maria. She was an older woman, a Mexican immigrant with rough hands and a tired face. She used to sing while she cleaned the toilets. She used to hum songs about Jesus Christ. I remember one day I found her sitting in the break room reading a small, worn-out Bible. I had asked her, "Why do you read that? Does it pay your bills?" Maria had smiled at me, a smile that reached her eyes in a way mine never did. She said, "No, Sarah, it does not pay my bills, but it feeds my soul. It tells me about eternal life. It tells me that this world is not my home." I had laughed at her. I told her she was wasting her time. I told her she should take night classes and get a better job instead of praying to a silent sky. I walked away feeling superior. But standing there on the balcony of the gala, looking at the rain, I suddenly remembered Maria's face. I remembered the peace she had. She had nothing, yet she had everything. I had everything, yet I had nothing. The thought made me angry. I did not want to feel this way. I checked my phone. I had 3 new emails. Distraction, that was my drug. I focused on the emails. A vendor issue for next week, a budget question, a complaint about the flowers, good. Problems I could solve, problems I could control. I turned away from the window and walked back into the warmth of the party. I put my mask back on. I smiled at the donors. I shook hands with the board members. I accepted their compliments. "Wonderful event, Sarah. You have outdone yourself, Sarah. Simply magical, Sarah." I nodded and thanked them, but inside I felt like a fraud. The words felt like ash in my mouth. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run out of the building, but I did not. I stayed until the very last guest left. I stayed until the cleanup crew arrived. It is funny how life works. You spend years building a legacy, worrying about your retirement fund, worrying about your wrinkles, worrying about your social status. You plan for the next 5 years, the next 10 years. You think you have time. You think death is something that happens to other people. You think it happens to the old, the sick, or the reckless. You do not think it will happen to you on a Tuesday night in Seattle. I watched the cleanup crew for a moment. They were wearing uniforms just like the one I used to wear. I saw a young woman picking up the dirty napkins I had chosen so carefully. She looked tired. For a brief second, I thought about saying something to her, maybe giving her a big tip, maybe asking her name. But I was too tired. I just wanted to go home. "I am heading out," I told my assistant. "Handle the rest. I will see you in the morning." "Good night, Sarah. Drive safe," she said. "I always do," I replied. Those were the last words I spoke to another human being on Earth. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The building was quiet now. The security guard nodded at me as I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the night. The rain had picked up. It was coming down in sheets, blurring the streetlights into long streaks of neon on the wet asphalt. The wind was cold and bit through my coat. I did not have my car that night. It was in the shop for repairs. I had planned to call a ride-share, but when I looked at my app, the wait time was 20 minutes. I was impatient. I was always impatient. I decided to walk a few blocks to the main avenue where it would be easier to catch a cab. I opened my umbrella and started walking. My heels clicked on the wet sidewalk. I was alone on the street. The city felt abandoned, washed clean by the storm. I pulled my phone out again. I was addicted to the screen. I wanted to see the photos from the event. I wanted to see if anyone had posted about it on social media. I wanted the validation. I was looking at a picture of the centerpiece, criticizing the angle of the shot, when I reached the corner. The crosswalk signal was red, meaning stop. But I looked left, then right. The street seemed empty. I was the type of person who did not like to wait for rules. If the coast was clear, I went. I stepped off the curb. I remember the sound of the rain hitting my umbrella. I remember the blue light of my phone screen illuminating my thumb. And then I heard a sound that I will never forget as long as I exist. It was not a horn. There was no time for a horn. It was the sound of tires losing their grip. A long, wet screech of rubber sliding on water. I looked up. It wasn't a car. It was a delivery truck, one of those boxy vans that rush through the city at night. The driver must have been going too fast for the weather. He must not have seen me in my dark coat against the dark night. He hit the brakes, but on the wet Seattle hills, brakes are just a suggestion. The truck was sliding sideways, coming right at me. Time did not slow down. People say your life flashes before your eyes. It didn't. In that split second, I did not think about my childhood. I did not think about my bank account. I did not think about my mother. I had one single, terrifying thought. I am not ready. That was it. Just a sudden, violent realization that I was about to check out of existence with a phone in my hand and a soul full of pride. I tried to jump back, but my heel slipped on the wet metal of a grate. I fell backward. The massive grille of the truck filled my vision. The headlights were blinding white eyes, staring right into me. I expected pain. I braced myself for the crushing of bones, the tearing of skin. I expected to feel the impact shatter my body. But the pain never came. Instead, there was a massive jolt, like the entire universe had been slammed shut. The sound of the rain cut off instantly. The lights of the city vanished. The cold wind stopped. One moment, I was Sarah, the event planner, standing in the rain in Seattle. The next moment, I was nowhere. There was no transition, no tunnel of light, no dead relatives waiting to hug me, no peaceful music. There was just absolute, suffocating darkness. I tried to blink, but I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed. It was pitch black, a darkness so thick you could feel it pressing against your skin. I tried to breathe, but the air was gone. Or rather, I didn't need to breathe, but the instinct was still there, panic rising in a chest that no longer moved. "Hello?" I tried to scream. My voice didn't sound like my voice. It sounded small, muffled, as if I was speaking from inside a coffin buried under 10 feet of concrete. "Is anyone there? Help me!" Silence, but not a peaceful silence. It was a heavy silence, a waiting silence. Then the smell hit me. It wasn't the smell of the hospital. It wasn't the metallic scent of blood. It was a smell I had never encountered in my life, yet I recognized it instantly with a primal part of my being. It smelled like sulfur, like burning hair, like rotting meat, and like old, stagnant dust that had not been disturbed for 1,000 years. It was the smell of death. My mind raced. I must be in a coma, I thought. I must be dreaming. I hit my head. The ambulance is coming. I just need to wake up. Wake up, Sarah. Wake up. I tried to pinch myself. I felt a hand touch an arm, but the texture was wrong. My skin felt cold. Not the cold of the Seattle rain, but a deep, penetrating cold that went through to the bone. Then I heard it. It started as a low hum, barely audible. I strained my ears, trying to make sense of it. It sounded like wind blowing through a canyon. But as I listened closer, the sound resolved itself. It wasn't wind. It was voices. Thousands of them. Millions of them. A chorus of whispers surrounding me in the dark. They weren't speaking to me. They were speaking to themselves. Too late. Too late. Too late. Why didn't I listen? It burns. It burns. Let me out. Please let me out. The voices were overlapping, a tapestry of pure misery. I spun around in the darkness, waving my hands, trying to push them away. "Where am I?" I screamed, my panic finally breaking through the confusion. "Who are you people?" A voice, much closer than the others, whispered right into my ear. It was a dry, raspy voice, like sandpaper on stone. "You know where you are, Sarah." My heart, or whatever I had now, froze. "You have always known this place exists," the voice whispered. "You just chose to ignore it." I swung my hand at the voice, but I hit nothing but damp air. "No!" I shouted. "I am in the hospital. I am a wealthy woman. I have insurance. Get me a doctor." A laugh echoed in the darkness. It was a cruel, mocking sound. "Your money is not currency here," the voice hissed. "Your status means nothing here. You are not an event planner here. You are just another soul that ran out of time." And then the darkness began to lift. But it wasn't the sun rising. It was a dull, red glow coming from below, revealing where I really was. The red glow grew stronger, pulsing like a slow, dying heartbeat. As my eyes adjusted, the darkness did not disappear. It just took shape. I wasn't in a hospital room. I wasn't in an ambulance. I was standing in a corridor. But this was no hallway I had ever designed. There were no clean lines, no polished marble floors, no tasteful sconces on the walls. The floor beneath my bare feet was cold stone, slick with a thick, oily moisture that felt like sweat. The walls were made of rough, jagged rock that seemed to stretch up forever, disappearing into a smoky haze above my head. And the walls were moving. I remember blinking hard, trying to clear my vision, thinking this was a concussion. "Focus, Sarah," I told myself. "Assess the situation. That was my training. When things go wrong at an event, you don't panic. You assess, you delegate, you fix." I reached out to touch the wall to steady myself. The moment my fingers brushed the stone, I pulled back with a gasp. It wasn't just stone. It felt organic. It felt like cold, hard flesh that had calcified over centuries. And it was vibrating. The vibration was coming from the sound, the voices. In the previous darkness, they had been a confused murmur. Now, in this corridor, they were distinct, and there were millions of them. It sounded like a stadium full of people all whispering their darkest secrets at the exact same time. The sound was physical. It pressed against my ears, against my skin. It was a pressure that made it hard to think. I started walking. I didn't know where else to go. My high heels were gone. My expensive coat was gone. I was wearing a gray, shapeless garment that looked like rags, stained with the same oily substance that was on the floor. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling. "Hello?" I called out again, my voice shaking. "I need to speak to someone in charge." The irony of that statement hits me now. I was still trying to be the manager. I was still trying to find the person responsible so I could complain about the accommodations. I wanted to speak to the director. I wanted to threaten to sue. I wanted to use my influence. But here, I had no influence. As I walked, the whispers became clearer. I could pick out individual sentences from the wall of sound, and what I heard chilled my blood more than the damp air. I should have called him. It wasn't worth it. Why did I wait? The money. It's all gone. I knew, and I didn't listen. These weren't conversations. They were loops. Endless, tormented loops of regret. It was the sound of millions of minds replaying their biggest mistakes over and over again, without pause, without sleep, without relief. I passed an alcove in the wall. Huddled in the corner was a figure. It looked like a man, but he was thin, gray, and translucent. He was scratching at the stone floor with his fingernails, rhythmically, obsessively. "Excuse me," I said, stepping closer. "Sir, can you tell me where we are? Is this a hospital basement?" He didn't look up. He didn't even pause his scratching. He just kept muttering to himself. "Just one more deal, just one more signature. I can fix it, I can fix it, I can fix it." He was a businessman. I recognized the tone, I recognized the obsession. He was stuck in the moment of his greatest idol, the thing he had put before God. I backed away, terrified. "Sir!" I shouted. He stopped scratching. He slowly turned his head toward me. His eyes were gone. In their place were two pools of absolute emptiness, voids that seemed to suck the light out of the air. He opened his mouth, and a sound came out that wasn't a voice. It was a dry rattle of despair. "You are dead, Sarah." I stumbled back, tripping over the hem of my rag. "No," I whispered. "No, I am not. I am 34 years old. I have a meeting tomorrow. I have a life." "You had a life," the man hissed, turning back to the floor. "Now you have this." I scrambled to my feet and ran. I ran down the corridor, my bare feet slapping against the wet stone. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs ached, but the corridor didn't end. It just twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the belly of the earth. The smell got worse. It was the smell of sulfur, yes, but mixed with something else, the smell of fear. Have you ever smelled fear? It is sour. It is metallic. It is the smell of a trapped animal. And here, the air was thick with it. I tried to organize my thoughts. Okay, plan B, I thought frantically. This is a hallucination. I am in a coma. My brain is misfiring. I just need to wake up. Wake up! I slapped my own face, hard. The sting was real. The pain was real. "This isn't fair!" I screamed at the ceiling. "I was a good person. I worked hard. I didn't kill anyone. Why am I here?" A voice boomed from the darkness ahead of me. It wasn't a human whisper this time. It was deep, guttural, and carried an authority that made my knees buckle. "Fairness is not what you wanted, Sarah. You wanted control. You wanted to be your own God. And God gave you exactly what you asked for, a place without Him." I froze. The realization hit me like the truck had hit me on the street. I wasn't in a coma. I wasn't dreaming. I was in hell. The word felt heavy in my mind. It was the word I had mocked, the word I had laughed at, the word I had used as a curse when I broke a nail or spilled coffee. Now, it was my reality. I looked at the walls again. The faces in the stone seemed to be watching me now. They weren't just random textures. They were souls. Souls trapped in the architecture of this place, fused with the misery they had chosen. I remembered the Christian testimonies I had ignored. I remembered the people on street corners holding signs that said, "Repent." I used to think they were crazy. I used to think they were hateful. Now, standing in this cold, dark corridor, I realized they were the only ones who had loved me enough to tell me the truth. I had spent my life planning events. I planned weddings, parties, celebrations. I made sure every detail was perfect for a few hours of happiness, but I had spent zero time planning for eternity. I had insured my car, my house, my health, but I had not insured my soul. I fell against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting in the muck. I put my head in my hands and wept. But even my tears felt different here. They were hot, scalding my cheeks, and they brought no relief. In this place, crying didn't make you feel better. It just made you thirstier. And then, the corridor began to change. The floor beneath me started to vibrate violently. The whispers stopped, replaced by a low, mechanical grinding sound. The walls pulled back, revealing a massive, cavernous space ahead. I stood up, trembling. I didn't want to go forward, but I couldn't go back. There was no back. There was only the path forward, into the red glow that was getting brighter and hotter. I was about to see what happens to people who feast on the world but starve their spirit. If this story is speaking to you, if something inside your heart is stirring, stay with me and take a moment to subscribe here to the channel. This is not just a video. This is an encounter with God. The grinding sound of the stone walls retreating was so loud I felt my teeth rattle in my skull. I covered my ears, but it did no good. The sound was inside me, vibrating through my bones. Then, silence. A sudden, heavy silence that felt even worse than the noise. I looked up. The narrow, suffocating corridor was gone. In its place was a room so vast I could not see the ceiling. It was a ballroom. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew this room, or at least I knew the style. It was a grotesque, twisted parody of the very ballrooms I used to command in Seattle. There were chandeliers hanging from the darkness above, but they did not hold crystal droplets or warm LED lights. They held jagged shards of bone and dripping fat that burned with a sickly green flame. The light they cast was not flattering. It was revealing. It showed every pore, every scar, every terrifying detail of the nightmare I had walked into. The floor was covered in a carpet that looked like red velvet, the kind I used to order for VIP sections. But as I took a step, my bare foot squelched. It was not fabric. It was a thick, mossy layer of something wet and living, pulsing faintly under my weight. I wanted to vomit, but my stomach was empty. It had been empty since the moment that truck hit me. I was starving. The hunger was a sharp physical pain, a claw twisting inside my gut. And then I smelled it. Food. It was the most delicious smell I had ever encountered. Roast beef, fresh bread, rich gravy, chocolate, wine. It wafted toward me, overpowering the smell of sulfur and rot. My mouth watered instantly. I forgot the fear. I forgot the darkness. I only wanted to eat. "Welcome, Sarah." I jumped. Standing next to me was a figure. He was dressed in a tuxedo, the kind my staff used to wear. But the suit was fused to his skin. It was black and sleek, but it looked like charred leather. He was tall, impossibly thin, and his face was a mask of polite cruelty. He had no eyes, just smooth skin where they should be, and a mouth that was stitched into a permanent, wide grin. He bowed low, his movements jerky and unnatural. "We have been expecting you," the thing said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly terrifying. "The guest of honor is always the last to arrive." He gestured with a long, clawed hand toward the center of the room. There were tables, hundreds of them, round tables set with white cloths, silver cutlery, and crystal glasses. It was exactly like the gala I had just left. It was my work. It was my life, recreated here in this pit of despair. I walked forward, drawn by the smell of the food. I saw people sitting at the tables. They were dressed in finery, gowns, suits, jewelry. From a distance, they looked like the elite of Seattle. They looked like my clients. But as I got closer, the illusion shattered. Their clothes were tattered rags that hung off skeletal frames. Their skin was gray and peeling, like parchment that had been left in the sun too long. And they were eating. They were shoveling food into their mouths with a desperation that was horrifying to watch. I stopped at a table near the front. I recognized the woman sitting there. It was a famous philanthropist I had worked with years ago. She had died of a stroke 2 years prior. On Earth, she was known for her elegance. Here, she was a monster of gluttony. She grabbed a piece of bread from the basket in the center of the table. It looked warm and soft. She shoved it into her mouth, her eyes wide with madness. But the moment her teeth bit down, the bread exploded into gray dust. Ash. She gagged, coughing violently, a cloud of dry gray powder bursting from her lips. She clawed at her throat, her face contorting in agony. But then, she reached for a glass of wine. The red liquid sparkled in the green light. She tipped it back, desperate to wash away the taste of the ash. The moment the liquid touched her tongue, it hissed. It turned into molten lead. She screamed, a sound that bubbled and gargled in her burning throat. And then she reached for more. I watched in horror. She couldn't stop. None of them could. They were stuck in a cycle of infinite hunger and infinite torture. They reached for the things they had chased on earth, pleasure, comfort, excess, and those very things were now their torment. "Why are they doing that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why don't they stop?" The waiter was standing right behind me. I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "Because they are hungry, Sarah," he whispered. "They spent a lifetime feeding their bodies and starving their souls. Now, the hunger is all that is left. They think the next bite will satisfy. They think the next drink will bring peace. But in hell, hope is just another weapon we use against you." He placed a hand on my shoulder. His grip was like a vice of hot iron. "Your table is ready, madam." "No," I said, trying to pull away. "I am not hungry. I don't want to eat." "Oh, but you must," he hissed, his grin widening until it seemed to split his face. "You spent your life setting the table for others. You spent your life worrying about the presentation, the taste, the experience. You made gluttony look beautiful. You made greed look like sophistication. Now you must enjoy the fruit of your labor." He shoved me. I flew forward, stumbling and falling into a chair at an empty table. The moment I sat down, invisible chains snapped around my wrists and ankles, binding me to the chair. I struggled, pulling against them, but they were solid. "Let me go!" I screamed. "I command you to let me go. I am not one of them." "You are exactly one of them," the waiter said, stepping back. "You worshipped the creation rather than the creator. You built temples to vanity. Now, eat." A plate appeared in front of me. On it was a perfect filet mignon, cooked exactly medium rare, just how I liked it. Next to it was a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lemon. My stomach roared. The hunger was overpowering my mind. I knew it was a trap. I had just seen what happened to the woman. I knew the food was ash. I knew the water was fire. But my hand moved on its own. My body was betraying me. I picked up the fork. It felt heavy and cold. I cut a piece of the meat. The juice ran red on the white plate. It looked so real. It looked so good. "Don't eat it, Sarah," a tiny voice inside me pleaded. "Don't do it." But the other voice, the voice of my flesh, the voice that had driven me to succeed at any cost, was louder. "Just one bite. Maybe for you, it will be different. Maybe you are special. You were always special." I lifted the fork to my lips. My hand was shaking. I opened my mouth. I bit down. For a fraction of a second, I tasted meat. And then it turned. It wasn't just ash. It was live coals. I screamed, but my mouth was full of fire. I tried to spit it out, but the ash coated my tongue, my roof, my throat. It was dry and incredibly hot, searing the delicate tissue of my mouth. I choked, gasping for air, inhaling the burning dust into my lungs. It felt like I had swallowed a grenade. The pain was absolute. It radiated from my jaw to my chest, a burning, consuming agony that made my vision go white. "Water!" I gasped mentally, reaching for the glass. "Yes, drink," the waiter mocked. "Quench your thirst." I grabbed the glass and threw the water into my face, trying to cool the burning. But the liquid didn't cool me. It was acid. It burned my skin, sizzling as it ran down my chin and neck. I sat there, bound to the chair, coughing up clouds of gray smoke, my face blistering from the acid. And the worst part? The hunger didn't go away. It got worse. The pain made me want comfort, and the only comfort in front of me was the poison. I looked around the room. Thousands of people. Doctors, lawyers, politicians, celebrities. All of them eating fire. All of them drinking poison. All of them trapped in the consequences of their own choices. I realized then that hell is not just a place where demons torture you. It is a place where you torture yourself with the things you loved more than Jesus. I had loved control. I had loved the perfect image. I had loved the sensory pleasure of a good life. And now, those things were the instruments of my destruction. Please, I sobbed, the word coming out as a dry croak. Please, just let me die. I want to die. The waiter leaned in close, his face inches from mine. I could smell the rot of his breath. That is the great tragedy, Sarah, he whispered. You are already dead, and you will never, ever die again. This dinner party lasts forever. He snapped his fingers. The table dissolved. The chair dissolved. The floor beneath me gave way. I was falling again. But this time, I wasn't falling into darkness. I was falling into something much worse. I was falling into isolation. The noise of the banquet faded away, replaced by a terrifying silence that was heavy enough to crush a soul. I fell for what felt like hours, tumbling through the void. The heat increased. It wasn't just warm anymore. It was an oven. I hit the ground hard. It was rock, jagged and sharp. I lay there in the dark, my mouth still burning from the ash, my skin stinging from the acid. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And that is when the real torture began. Because when you are in a crowd, even in hell, you are distracted. But when you are alone in the dark, you have to face the one person you spent your entire life running away from. Yourself. I hit the ground. It was not a soft landing. I slammed into jagged, uneven rock that tore at my skin. The impact knocked the wind out of me, leaving me gasping on the floor of what felt like a deep, narrow well. I lay there for a long time, too terrified to move. I waited for the waiter to return. I waited for the sound of the banquet to drift down from above. I waited for the demons to come and drag me away to some new torture chamber. But nothing came. The silence here was different from the silence in the corridor. In the corridor, the silence was heavy with the threat of noise. Here, the silence was absolute. It was the silence of a grave that has been sealed and forgotten. It was the silence of a universe where God has turned his back. I slowly pushed myself up. My body was in agony. The burns from the acid water were throbbing, and the phantom taste of the ash was still coating my tongue. I was thirsty. It is a thirst I cannot describe to you, because on earth you can always find water. Even if you are lost in a desert, there is hope of rain. Here, the air itself sucked the moisture from my pores. I reached out blindly. My hands hit a wall. It was hot. Not warm, but hot, like the side of a kettle that has been boiling for hours. I pulled my hand back, hissing in pain. I reached out in the other direction. Another wall. I stood up and reached over my head. I could not touch a ceiling, but the walls were close. I was in a shaft, a stone tube buried deep in the earth. The heat was rising from the floor, baking me from the soles of my feet up. It was a suffocating, dry heat that made my skin feel like it was cracking like old paint. "Is anyone there?" I whispered. My voice did not echo. The walls seemed to absorb the sound, swallowing it instantly. "Help me!" I screamed louder. "I am sorry! I didn't mean to eat the food! Just let me out!" Silence. I began to pound on the walls. I hammered my fists against the hot stone until my knuckles bled, but the rock did not chip. It did not vibrate. It was solid, immovable, eternal. I sank down into a crouch, hugging my knees to my chest. I tried to cry, but I had no tears left. The heat had evaporated them before they could form. And then the real torment began. It started as a flicker in the darkness. A small, pale light appeared on the wall in front of me. I squinted at it, confused. It grew brighter, sharpening into an image. It looked like a projection, a movie playing on the rough stone. I saw a room, I recognized it instantly. It was my office in downtown Seattle. The sleek glass desk, the view of the Space Needle, the expensive ergonomic chair. I saw myself sitting at the desk. I looked younger, maybe 5 years ago. I looked powerful. I was on the phone, laughing. "I know, right?" the Sarah on the screen said. "She actually thinks praying is going to fix the budget." I watched as the door to my office opened. A woman walked in. It was Maria, the housekeeper I had mentioned earlier. She was holding a small, crumpled piece of paper. I remembered this day. Oh God, I remembered this day. I tried to close my eyes, but I couldn't. My eyelids wouldn't shut. I was forced to watch. On the screen, Maria looked nervous. She placed the paper on my desk. It was a tract, a simple, colorful pamphlet about salvation. "Miss Sarah," Maria said softly, "I found this in the lobby. I thought, maybe you needed to see it. You look so tired lately." The Sarah on the screen stopped laughing. Her face went cold. The expression was one of pure disgust. She picked up the tract with 2 fingers as if it were a dirty tissue. "Maria," the Sarah on the screen said, her voice dripping with condescension, "do I pay you to preach or do I pay you to clean?" "I just wanted to help," Maria whispered. "Jesus loves you, Miss Sarah." "Jesus doesn't sign my paychecks," I snapped back, "and neither do you. If I see this trash in my office again, you are fired. Do you understand? Fired. Now get out." Maria lowered her head and walked out. The Sarah on the screen crumpled the tract into a ball and tossed it into the recycling bin, then went back to her phone call. "Can you believe that?" she said to the person on the line. "Some people are so delusional." The image on the wall froze on my laughing face. The sound of my own laughter echoed in the pit, loud and distorted. It wasn't funny. It sounded demonic. It sounded like the cackle of a madwoman. "Stop it!" I screamed at the wall. "I didn't mean it. I was stressed. I was having a bad day." The image didn't fade. It replayed. "Do I pay you to preach or do I pay you to clean? Do I pay you to preach or do I pay you to clean? Do I pay you to preach or do I pay you to clean?" The loop was relentless. It played over and over again, faster and faster, until the words blurred into a chaotic noise. I covered my ears, but the sound was coming from inside my head. It was my own memory, weaponized against me. I fell to the floor, writhing in agony. It wasn't just the memory of the event. It was the memory of the feeling. I felt the pride I had felt in that moment. I felt the arrogance. I felt the utter lack of compassion. And now, in the light of truth, that pride felt like burning coals in my chest. I realized then that I was not a good person. I had told myself for years that I was. I thought because I didn't steal and didn't kill, I was fine. But watching that scene, I saw the darkness in my own heart. I saw how I treated the lowly. I saw how I rejected the messenger of God. The scene changed. Now I was at a dinner party. I was holding a glass of wine, surrounded by friends. Someone had brought up a tragedy in the news, a natural disaster where thousands had died. "Well," the Sarah on the screen said, swirling her wine, "if there really was a God, he wouldn't let that happen, would he? It proves we are alone. We have to look out for ourselves." I watched my friends nod in agreement. I watched myself toast to human ingenuity. I screamed in the pit, "I was wrong, I was wrong. He is real, he is real." But the Sarah on the screen just kept smiling, confident in her atheism, confident in her ignorance. The heat in the pit spiked. It became unbearable. My skin felt like it was shrinking. The air was so hot, it scorched my throat with every breath. But the heat wasn't just physical temperature. It was the presence of sin. In hell, sin is not an abstract concept. It is a substance. It is heavy. It is hot. It is toxic. And because I had never asked for forgiveness, because I had never washed my robes in the blood of the Lamb, I was covered in it. I was wearing my pride like a coat of lead. I was wearing my greed like shackles of fire. I looked at the wall again. The scenes were flashing faster now. Every lie I ever told, every dollar I cheated on my taxes, every time I walked past a homeless person and looked away in disgust, every time I mocked a Christian, every time I used the Lord's name in vain, it was an avalanche of guilt. "Enough!" I shrieked, clawing at my own face. "Please, make it stop. I can't take it." A voice spoke from the darkness above the pit. It was the waiter again. "You spent 34 years building this archive, Sarah. Why do you not want to watch it? You were so proud of your life. You posted photos of it. You bragged about it. Now you must watch the unedited version." "I want to leave," I begged. "I will do anything. I will be a maid. I will scrub the floors of hell forever. Just let me out of this hole. I don't want to be alone." "You wanted to be alone," the waiter replied, his voice echoing down the shaft. "You pushed everyone away who tried to tell you the truth. You isolated yourself in your tower of success. You didn't want Jesus in your life. You didn't want his people. You didn't want his laws. You wanted to be the sole ruler of your existence. Well, congratulations. You are the queen of this pit. Long live the queen." The light on the wall faded, leaving me in total darkness again. But the images were burned into my retinas. I could still see Maria's sad eyes. I could still hear my own cruel laughter. I curled into a ball on the burning floor. The isolation was crushing me. I realized that hell is not a party with your friends. There are no friends here. There is no camaraderie in suffering. There is only you and the raw, naked truth of who you are without God. I thought about time. How long had I been here? 10 minutes? An hour? It felt like 1,000 years. And the terrifying thought hit me. This was just the beginning. Eternity is a word we use casually. We say, "This line is taking forever." But we don't understand the concept. Forever means no end, no halftime, no timeout, no sleep, no morning. I tried to imagine 1 billion years in this pit, and then 1 billion more, and then 1 billion more. And after all that time, I would still be at the very beginning. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the heat. I started to hyperventilate. "I can't do this," I whispered. "I can't do this." But I was doing it. I was existing in it. I started to rock back and forth, a rhythmic motion to try and soothe the madness that was clawing at my mind. "Jesus?" The word slipped out before I could stop it. It wasn't a prayer. It was just a memory. It was the name Maria had used. "Jesus loves you, Ms. Sarah." I froze. The name felt different in my mouth. It didn't burn like the other words. It felt cool, like a drop of water on a parched tongue. I said it again, louder this time. "Jesus." The walls of the pit seemed to tremble. The heat didn't lessen, but the crushing weight of the darkness seemed to pause. "Jesus," I whispered, looking up at the black opening of the shaft. I didn't know how to pray. I didn't know the fancy words. I didn't know the scriptures. All I knew was that I was in a pit, and I had no way out. And the money I had in the bank back in Seattle couldn't buy a ladder tall enough to reach the top. I thought about all the testimonies I had mocked. They always talked about calling out. They always talked about surrender. I had never surrendered to anyone in my life. I was Sarah the boss, Sarah the planner, Sarah the controller, but Sarah the controller was dead. Sarah the boss was ash. There was nothing left of me but fear and pain. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in my existence, I let go of my pride. I let it drop to the floor like a heavy stone. I admitted the one thing I had spent my entire life denying. "I am lost," I whispered. "I am so lost." The heat pressed in closer, as if the pit was angry at my admission. I felt a pressure in my ears, a low growl rising from the earth beneath me. The demons didn't like that name. They didn't like that admission. But I didn't care. I had nothing left to lose. I took a deep breath of the sulfurous air, and I prepared to do the one thing that my corporate training had never taught me to do. I prepared to beg. The moment I decided to beg, the atmosphere in the pit changed from oppressive to violent. The darkness was no longer just a lack of light. It became a physical weight, like a heavy, suffocating blanket made of lead. I felt pressure on my chest, on my throat, on my eyes. It was as if the pit itself knew what I was about to do and was trying to crush the air out of my lungs before I could speak. I heard a sound that was not a human voice. It was a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the stone floor and into my bones. It was the sound of pure, concentrated hatred. The demons were not visible in the shaft, but they were there. I could feel their presence like static electricity on my skin. They were close, and they were angry. "Don't say it," a voice hissed in my mind. "Don't you dare say his name. You belong to us. You signed the contract with your pride. You are ours." I tried to open my mouth, but my jaw felt locked. It took every ounce of strength I had just to part my lips. My tongue felt swollen, dry as sandpaper. "He won't hear you," the voice mocked. "You laughed at him. You mocked his servants. Do you really think the King of Kings listens to the prayers of a woman who spent 34 years spitting in his face? You are a hypocrite, Sarah. Die with some dignity." For a second, I almost listened. The accusation was true. I was a hypocrite. I had mocked him. Why would God save me? I was the woman who fired Maria for sharing a tract. I was the woman who toasted to atheism. I deserved this heat. I deserved this silence. But then another memory surfaced. It wasn't a visual memory on the wall this time. It was an auditory one. It was Maria's voice again, clear as a bell, cutting through the demonic static in my head. I remembered a day when I had found her crying in the break room. Her son was sick. I had asked her, awkwardly, if she needed an advance on her paycheck. She had looked at me, tears streaming down her face, and shook her head. "Money is good, Miss Sarah," she had said, "but prayer is better. The Bible says that whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Whoever, Miss Sarah. Even me. Even you." Whoever. That word hung in the blistering air. It didn't say, "Whoever is perfect." It didn't say, "Whoever has been a Christian their whole life." It said, "Whoever." That meant me. I realized then that my logic was earthly logic. On earth, if you insult a CEO, you don't get a job. If you mock a client, you lose the contract. But God does not operate on my business logic. His economy is grace. His currency is mercy. The growling grew louder. The heat spiked, searing the soles of my feet. The darkness pressed down harder, trying to snap my neck. I didn't care. I was terrified, yes, but I was also desperate. And desperation is the only thing that breaks through pride. I pushed myself up onto my knees. It felt like I was lifting a mountain. My body was trembling violently. I clasped my hands together, interlacing my fingers so tight my knuckles turned white. I looked up into the black void above me. "Jesus," I croaked. The sound was weak, barely a whisper. The darkness swirled around me, aggressive and thick. "Shut up," the voices screamed. "Shut up! You are filth!" "Jesus," I said again, louder this time. I put my will into it. I put my fear into it. I put my entire broken life into it. "Jesus, I am sorry." The words ripped out of my throat. They weren't pretty. They weren't poetic. They were raw. "I am sorry for my pride. I am sorry for my arrogance. I am sorry for mocking you. I was wrong. I was so wrong." The pit shook, actually shook. Rocks fell from the walls, clattering onto the floor around me. The growling turned into a high-pitched screeching, like metal tearing apart. The demons were in pain. The very name of Jesus was torture to them. I realized then the power I had ignored my whole life. I used to think power was money. I used to think power was influence. But here, in the spiritual realm, money was ash, and influence was a joke. The only true power, the only authority that made the darkness tremble, was the name of Jesus Christ. "Lord Jesus," I screamed, tears finally flowing, evaporating instantly on my burning cheeks. "I don't want to be my own God anymore. I surrender. I surrender everything. Please, save me. Take me out of this place." I bowed my head until my forehead touched the burning stone floor. I gave up. I stopped trying to negotiate. I stopped trying to explain. I just offered him my emptiness. "Please," I sobbed, "save me." For a moment, there was chaos. The screeching reached a deafening crescendo. The heat became unbearable. I thought I was going to be incinerated. And then it happened. It didn't start as a glow. It started as a piercing. A beam of light, pure, blinding, brilliant white light, shot down from the darkness above. It was solid. It hit the floor of the pit right in front of me, shattering the gloom like a hammer hitting glass. The light was so bright I had to squeeze my eyes shut, but I could still see it through my eyelids. It was brighter than the sun, brighter than 1,000 spotlights. But it wasn't hot. It was cool. It radiated a clean, fresh coldness that washed over my burning skin like a river of ice water. I looked up, shielding my eyes. The beam of light was a tunnel, cutting straight through the strata of hell, straight through the rock, straight through the separation. And in the center of that light, I felt a presence. I didn't see a face. I didn't see a man in robes. I saw glory. I felt a holiness so absolute that it made me want to hide, yet a love so overwhelming that it made me want to run toward it. The demons screamed and scattered. They couldn't touch the light. They couldn't even look at it. They fled into the shadows, hissing and cursing, driven back by the authority of the Son of God. I was alone with the light. "Sarah." The voice did not come from the waiter. It did not come from the walls. It came from everywhere at once. It was not a voice of judgment, though it carried the weight of the universe. It was a voice of sorrow and rescue. "You called me." "Yes, Lord," I whispered, trembling. "I called you." "Do you believe?" the voice asked. It wasn't a question about facts. It was a question about trust. Did I believe he could save me? Did I believe he was who he said he was? I thought about my degrees. I thought about my bank accounts. I thought about my skepticism. All of it seemed like garbage now. "I believe," I cried out. "I believe you are the Son of God. I believe you died for me. I believe you are the only way out." The light intensified. It wrapped around me. I felt a physical sensation of being lifted. It was as if a giant, gentle hand had scooped me up from the floor of the pit. The gravity of hell, which had felt so heavy, suddenly lost its grip. I was rising. I looked down. I saw the pit receding below me. I saw the red glow of the banquet hall. I saw the twisting corridors of the lost. I saw the vast, terrifying landscape of suffering stretching out in all directions. It was a kingdom of pain, and I was leaving it. I felt a sensation I hadn't felt since the truck hit me. I felt peace. It wasn't the peace of a spa day. It wasn't the peace of a vacation. It was the peace of safety. It was the peace of a child who has been found by their father after being lost in the woods. I floated upward, faster and faster, through the layers of the earth, through the darkness, chasing the source of the light. The smell of sulfur faded. The screams of the damned faded. I was being pulled back. I want you to understand something before I tell you what happened next. I know this sounds impossible. I know your mind is trying to rationalize it, just like mine used to. But please, if you have listened this far, do not turn away now. You are here for a reason. God guided you to this story because He does not want you to visit the place I just described. Stay with me for just a few more minutes. The end of this story is the most important part. The light became blindingly white, swallowing everything. The sensation of rising turned into a sensation of rushing wind. I felt a jolt, not like the truck hitting me, but like a diver breaking the surface of the water after almost drowning. My lungs expanded. My heart slammed against my ribs. I gasped. A rush of cold, sterile air filled my chest. It tasted like antiseptic and oxygen. I heard a beep, then another, then a steady rhythmic pulsing sound. Beep, beep, beep. I opened my eyes. The red glow was gone. The stone walls were gone. The demons were gone. I was staring up at a white-tiled ceiling. A bright fluorescent light was humming above me. I tried to move, but my body felt heavy, like it was made of lead. "She's back," a voice shouted. "We got a rhythm! Sinus rhythm restored!" I blinked, my vision blurry. Faces hovered over me. They were wearing masks. They were wearing blue scrubs. Doctors. One of them, a man with gray hair and kind eyes, leaned over me. He looked exhausted. He was holding paddles in his hands. "Sarah?" he said loudly. "Can you hear me, Sarah?" I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. I remembered the ash. I remembered the screaming. I coughed, a dry, hacking cough. "Water," I whispered. The doctor let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a long time. He looked at the nurse and nodded. "She is back," he said, and there was awe in his voice. "I can't believe it. She is back." I lay there, feeling the sheets against my skin. They were rough, hospital-grade cotton. To me, they felt like silk. I felt the pain of the IV needle in my arm. It felt like a kiss. Pain meant I was alive. Pain meant I was not in the pit. I closed my eyes again, and tears leaked out of the corners, running down into my ears. I was alive. But I was not the same Sarah who had left the gala. That woman had died on the wet pavement. That woman had gone to hell. The person lying in that hospital bed was someone new, someone who had seen the other side of the curtain. I had been given a second chance, and I knew with absolute certainty that I would not waste a single second of it. The days that followed my return were a blur of beeping machines, hushed conversations, and the smell of antiseptic. I spent 2 weeks in the ICU. My body was broken, 3 fractured ribs, a shattered pelvis, and severe internal bruising from the impact of the truck. But the doctors were not focused on my bones. They were focused on my heart. "It is a medical miracle, Sarah," the lead cardiologist told me one morning, looking at my chart with a furrowed brow. "You were clinically dead for 6 minutes. No pulse, no brain activity. We had actually called the time of death. And then, spontaneously, your heart just restarted. It kicked back into a perfect rhythm. 6 minutes. To the world, I was gone for the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. But to me, those 6 minutes were an eternity. I had lived a lifetime in that dark corridor. I had aged 1,000 years in that banquet hall. I had felt the weight of forever in that pit. When I was finally discharged, my assistant came to pick me up. She brought my laptop, my schedule, and a list of urgent emails. She started talking about the spring gala, about the flower arrangements, about the budget issues. "Sarah, we really need your approval on the linens," she said, scrolling through her phone as she drove me to my penthouse. "The client is getting anxious." I looked out the window at the rainy streets of Seattle. Everything looked different now. The skyscrapers didn't look like monuments of success anymore. They looked like tombstones. The people rushing on the sidewalks didn't look busy. They looked lost. "Cancel it," I said softly. My assistant froze. "Cancel what? The linens?" "The gala," I said, turning to look at her. "Cancel the gala. Cancel the meetings. Cancel everything." "But the contract," she stammered. "The reputation. You can't just stop." "I can," I replied, "and I will." When I walked into my apartment, it felt like walking into a museum. The white leather sofas, the abstract art, the view of the bay, it was all cold. It was all dead. I went to my closet and looked at my designer clothes, thousands of dollars of silk and cashmere. I remembered the people in the banquet hall wearing rags that used to be finery. I remembered how their clothes had burned. I fell to my knees on the expensive hardwood floor and wept. Not out of fear this time, but out of gratitude. I was back. I had air in my lungs. I had a pulse. I had a chance to say the name of Jesus without fire filling my mouth. The next day, I resigned. My partners thought I had brain damage from the accident. They told me I was throwing away a fortune. They told me I was crazy. I didn't argue with them. How could I explain that the fortune they were chasing was actually a trap? How could I explain that the only currency that matters is the condition of your soul? I sold the penthouse. I sold the car. I gave the money to organizations that actually help people, not the ones that throw parties to pat themselves on the back. I moved into a small, simple apartment in a quiet neighborhood, but there was one thing I had left to do. One debt I had to pay. I went back to my old office building. I didn't go to the executive suite on the top floor. I went to the basement. I waited by the time clock where the cleaning staff signed in. When Maria walked in, she looked tired. She was carrying her heavy bag, ready for another shift of invisibility. When she saw me, she stopped. She looked afraid. She probably thought I was there to yell at her again, to fire her for some imagined mistake. "Ms. Sarah," she whispered, "I heard about your accident. I prayed for you." I broke down. I didn't care who was watching. I walked over to this woman, this humble servant of God whom I had treated like dirt, and I hugged her. I held on to her like she was the only solid thing in the world. "Thank you," I sobbed into her shoulder. "Thank you for praying. Thank you for the tract. Thank you for telling me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it." Maria didn't pull away. She held me, patting my back gently. "You met him, didn't you?" she asked softly. "I met him." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "And I met the other one, too. I saw where I was going, Maria. I saw the pit." From that day on, my life changed completely. I didn't go back to event planning. I took a job as a hospital chaplain assistant. It isn't glamorous. It doesn't pay well. I spend my days walking the same halls where I woke up, holding the hands of people who are dying. I sit with them. I listen to their regrets, and I tell them my story. I tell them that death is not the end. I tell them that there is a place of darkness and a place of light, and the choice is not made after you die. The choice is made now, right now. I see the fear in their eyes, the same fear I had, and I tell them about the name that breaks the chains, the name that cools the fire, the name of Jesus Christ. Some people laugh at me. They call me the crazy lady who had a hallucination. They say it was just oxygen deprivation. They say it was the trauma. I don't mind. Let them laugh. I would rather be laughed at and be saved than be applauded and be lost. I still have nightmares sometimes. I dream of the heat. I dream of the smell of sulfur. I wake up sweating, reaching for a glass of water just to make sure it doesn't turn to acid. But then I remember. I remember the light. I remember the hand that pulled me out. I am telling you this story today not to scare you, but to warn you. You might be like I was. You might be successful. You might be comfortable. You might think you have plenty of time to figure out the God thing later, but you don't know when your truck is coming. You don't know when your heart will stop. You don't know when the screen will go black, and when it does, your money won't help you. Your connections won't help you. Your good deeds won't help you. Only Jesus can help you. Please look at your life. Look at what you are building. Is it made of gold and silver that will last, or is it made of wood and hay that will burn? Are you feeding your body and starving your soul? Don't wait until you feel the heat to call out His name. Don't wait until the darkness is closing in. Do it now, while you have breath, while you have a voice, while you have a choice. If you have listened to this entire testimony, I know it is not an accident. God is knocking on the door of your heart. He loves you so much that He sent me back from the dead just to tell you this one thing. He is real. Hell is real, and He does not want you to go there. Before I go, I want to ask you one last thing. Please, help me spread this warning. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone you love. You never know. This story might be the thing that wakes them up before it is too late. My name is Sarah. I was a corporate planner, a success story, and a fool. Now I am just a servant, and I am telling you, with all the love in my heart, turn back. The bridge is out. The fire is real. Run to the cross, because the next breath you take is not guaranteed, but eternity is.